Hi, and welcome in. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of experiences that we've had in Cogent Roleplay. I'm Jason.
This is George.
And this is Velvet Games. So, George, I know we've both, at this point, DM'd Cogent Roleplay a little bit.
Yes.
And what would you say, as like, you've DM'd D&D, and you've DM'd Cogent Roleplay. How would you compare the two?
To simply say it is that I love using Cogent because it's so much more simple to work with. There's not an enormous set of like rules and like, oh yeah, this stat will increase this by 10 and this skill adds this +2 to this damage and all this extra stuff. It's just a lot for you to have to go through and think about. While in Cogent, it's very straightforward and very realistic.
Gotcha.
Something that's also difficult with D&D for me, or something why I love Cogent, is that like you'll hit like level 15 and you're basically like deity level stuff. It's ridiculous. It's like, oh yeah, I have 250 health. I'll be fine. When in reality, you're still immortal, or you're probably still immortal at this point, depending on how you're.
Depends how many cities I've blown up. That's really
sure.
Yeah, that's how you get immortalized, right?
No.
That's how I did it.
I mean, you technically did that way, but yes. When in reality, a side of D&D, a dagger is a D4 of damage, right?
Yeah.
But a spear is a D6 of damage, and then you're two-handing it is a D8 of damage. When in reality, a spear is literally a dagger on a stick.
Yep. Or
even smaller profile. They're both just as deadly, just as much as a great sword, just as much as an axe, and all type of stuff. So it makes it very difficult for me to make an encounter like super critical. Like, let's say an assassin gets behind you and he has a dagger to your neck.
Sure.
You're like, okay, cool. He's gonna crit me and he's gonna do 2d4 of damage to me.
Yeah.
So I'm fine. I'm a barbarian. I have 250 health.
Right.
You're like, forget it. I'm fine. When in reality, it's just as dangerous. So that's one of the things I love about Cogent, is that it's much more broad, but also just so much more simple. There's so much less math involved. So much like, oh, this skill adds this and this adds this. It's not like, MMORPGs nowadays that like you go and grab all these different equipments and put them together just for you to go and do like one thing.
Right.
Or to do one thing really, really well. It's just like very straightforward. You're proficient with a sword.
I get
awesome.
That.
Then it's tactics.
Yeah.
So
I'll play devil advocate here because I do like Cogent Roleplay.
Yeah.
And I've played D&D for going on 12 years. And so like I love D&D mostly because now at this point of playing, I have the experience and the know-how of taking a D&D character and making him whatever I want.
Yes.
And
AKA broken.
No. Whatever I want. Because I've played normal characters.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, with D&D, I feel like the one thing I would say against Cogent Roleplay is that D&D is a lot straightforward. It is like, okay, this is how much damage I do. And you have a number that you subtract. Yes, it's math, and yes, D&D,
a lot of math.
D&D would be really hard for illiterate people. Like, if you can't read and you can't write and you can't do math, like, that's going to be tough. And that's where I could see Cogent Roleplay kind of taking on and be like, this is so much simpler. Roll this many d6, and there you go.
Yeah.
But, like, with D&D, the whole thing of, like, let's take your example of an MMORPG, right?
Yes.
I play those and I'm like, okay, I want this equipment, I want this, and I want this specific stat boosted, and like that's how I play. Not always min-maxing, but I want my character to be my character.
Yes.
And with Cogent, you're more focused on to a role play aspect of like my character can do a lot, but he's specifically good at these skills. Like in the Fallout one of Daniel Miyagi. Like he was good as a martial artist and he had good throw and he had this, even though I missed every throw I ever threw.
It's because you were doing ridiculous, crazy stuff.
But,
but yes.
But like, if we put that into a D&D thing, if I was a monk and I had high athletics or acrobatics, I would say athletics would be a throw, more than likely.
Yeah, just depends.
But, I would have that stat clearly, and I'd roll that d20, and then I would go, okay, cool. This d20 plus this number equals this. This is the number I need to hit. Again, there's a lot of math. I definitely understand that when it comes to Cogent, but I feel like it's straightforward comparatively, where it's either hit or miss.
I actually disagree with that.
Okay, and why?
So you say it's straightforward, but you've also been playing for 12 years. For somebody that's never played D&D, it is not straightforward at all.
Okay.
When in reality, when you think about all this stuff, there's a lot of rules. There are a lot of abilities and skills. And then you start going into feats. You start going into magic, especially, that has hundreds of spells.
Right.
It gets extremely complicated really quick.
Sure.
And then for DMs that are trying to remember a lot of these skills, feats, and whatnot, it makes it hard for them to be able to balance stuff out. Something that might be very simple for you, for somebody that's new, is actually extremely complicated for them. Now, don't get me wrong. Both Cogent and D&D, you're like, oh yeah, I want to throw this rock. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Just roll this dice. So yes, you can still do that, but there's a less creativity on the player side. While for me, when I look at Cogent, let's say, for example, like what you were trying to do, okay?
Yeah.
You were trying to be creative with your throws, but you didn't have enough skill inside of throw for you to really make a difference. So you were trying to throw your sword and put the grenade bandolier on the sword to go and assist you with your throw.
Right.
Okay? So that's super creative. So when players do this stuff, they are able to assist themselves with certain things by just being creative. Like, let's say you're trying to climb a wall. That's athletics all day.
Sure.
But you want to go and do a little bit of parkour. You want to jump around here and there. That's also acrobatics. I'll have you roll assist for that, because it's still strength-based, but you're using your reflex to help you.
Yeah.
In D&D, you're just like, just roll this and that's it.
Right.
So... now, yeah, you can go and look into a bunch of things. You're like, oh yeah, this magic item gives me advantage to this. And
sure, yeah. And if we were in D&D in that environment,
it's just a bunch of different stuff.
If we were in that same environment and I was playing D&D, I'd just be like, cast catapult, boom, done deal. It would hit. It would go 90 feet in one direction, and like that's it. Like that's where the grenade bandolier would be.
Yeah.
And again, different. I'm sure we haven't expanded all of Cogent Roleplay by any means, because there's definitely more that we could do in Cogent.
Oh yeah, you can still do that inside of Cogent,
right?
But it's not as, simply put, overpowered.
Sure.
Because honestly, mages are very, very, very powerful and extremely versatile.
Well, rightfully so. Like in diving in a little bit into D&D and any kind of role-playing lore, really, wizards, mages, sorcerers, magic itself is power. It's just as useful as a sword or anything else, but it's more versatile.
Yeah, that's the argument. It's just as good. D&D, that's not the case. A fireball does way more damage than a sword does.
But a sword with a divine smite can do just as much as a fireball can.
That's magic still, though.
But again, it's a sword. Like, that's all that is one. You have the sword plus a little bit of this. All you have is just magic. So, like, yes, fireball, it can be. But again, somebody wielding this, like, crazy powerful sword I could venture to guess. Or a bow. Bow's better. A rogue with a bow, I've seen a rogue do more damage than a fireball.
Yes.
Again, the only difference is...
that's because of the class.
Right.
And that's where it comes down to, is how you play your class inside of D&D. And that's how it balances out.
Right.
That's the only way that it balances out, is due to your class. So you have to go and choose a class for you to be able to do a certain play style.
Right.
So that's why another thing I like about Cogent is that you can play technically any play style, because it is completely up to you to go and create what is essentially your class, or also known as the vocation.
Right.
So if you want to be an engineer, then it's reasonable for you to say that you are good with small blunt weapons.
Sure.
Like as wrenches and whatnot. I can, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then I can give you proficiencies and stuff like that. While inside of D&D, you're like, oh, I'm a barbarian. I am only good using my weapons and just absorbing damage. Now, yes, of course, there are subclasses that can give you magic, but that's going into a big rabbit hole that's super complicated when instead you just be creative with what you got.
I get that. And again, it is, like you said, I've been playing D&D for so long, and for the longest time, that was the most, and it still is really the most common tabletop game.
It is
just that. But like, we talked about this a couple days ago, getting somebody into tabletop role-playing games, I wouldn't even start them with D&D or Cogents. And it's as simple as this. And I did it when we started playing together, and when our other friends did. You get a piece of paper, you write down a superpower.
Yeah.
You give them you get them 3d20 each. That's all they need, right? And mostly because I'm a guy stoblin. You could really do it with 1d20. But and you just like go through a storyline and say, and let them know, hey, this is your superpower. If you want super speed, I think one campaign that we did, I added to it, and I was like, you pick a superpower and you pick a super weapon, and you have super speed and a lightsaber.
Yeah. You actually gave us 3 separate powers, and then
that's right. That's when I expanded it a lot. Yeah, and you had a I had lightsaber.
I had super speed. I had super regeneration.
Yep.
And was it invisibility?
Maybe.
I think so.
Yeah.
I made a very Deadpool-esque character, and then I used a lightsaber and a blaster pistol.
Right.
So.
But yeah, it's as simple as that, though. And like, our friend Matt, he played a character that was crazy for celery. Like, that was his thing. That was his whole thing.
Yes, that was pretty funny.
But that's how easy it can be. And this is taking Cogent and D&D, putting it to the side.
Yeah.
Tabletop role-playing is as simple as you want it to be. I could sit down and say, this is a whole storyline. And I actually made that you remember I think this is one of the first games we ever played together, where I had you guys roll a d20, and then I had a list of superpowers. And
yes, that was the first time we ever played together. I was playing a Dragonborn fighter that I got in metal control.
Yeah, and so
and broke your game.
Right, but that was the thing. Like, that's okay, and the whole world, because it was multiple worlds of like, I sent you guys to Jurassic Park, to like Pokemon, to all this different stuff where you guys got to play this tabletop game, but it wasn't restricted to D&D based. Like, you still had your character, but everybody was a magic user pretty much. Everybody had the same amount of skills. But it was all up to your imagination. And I think stuff like that, taking, like I said, putting D&D and Cogent and Call of Cthulhu and all these other games that we play that have all these limitations, those are guidelines. You can put them all to the side and go, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And as long as everybody's on the same page with that, I feel like any tabletop game you want to get into with your friends or kind of have fun with, it really just comes down, and like in Magic the Gathering, we have what's called a Rule 0 or Turn 0 conversation, and that's just basically, before we start this game, what are we gonna do? And if you have those Session 0 conversations, if you want, like, I know there's a name for it, but I can't think of it.
Generally, Session 0.
Session 0 conversations, and go, hey, what do you guys want to do? Do you guys want to play a campaign? Like, I had a couple of group of guys that wanted to play a campaign that had samurais, Lord of the Rings, and Star Wars all melded into this world. They didn't want magic, except for them to have magic.
Oh my gosh.
And
of course.
And they wanted the world to be set up with tribe lands rather than big cities.
Okay.
So what I did was I went home and I was like, okay, and I brought a whiteboard to our session 0 and I wrote down everything that they wanted. And I went home and I go, okay, how am I going to do this? All right, let's do 7. 7's a good number to build off of. And we'll touch more on like campaign building on another episode or so, but basically if you take what your players want to do and establish that, you can adapt a method, whether it's D&D, Cogent, Call of Cthulhu. You can adapt the method necessary to play a fun game, I feel, regardless of the, I guess, rule set that you use behind it. The tabletop game. I remember we played a game called Rifts with the magic crew that you guys see on here on the channel. But like, we played this game and I was a Deadpool-esque character. I had 2 katanas, and Nick was basically my Chewbacca. Like, he was a werewolf. He was a lycanthrope character where he like could only speak, and I was the only one that could understand him. So like, I was basically
reminds me of bedtime stories.
Yeah. And so like, I literally would walk around with this laser rifle and 2 katanas and just like obliterate everything from a distance, and then he would just be like with a machine gun. And later on I went on this awesome. And we had a great time, and I really want to get into Rifts on the channel again. That would be fun. But what I'm saying is, I understand as a DM the differences of Cogent, and the way you explain it makes a lot of sense too.
Because it's primarily on the DM, honestly.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference.
Definitely.
Because it's much easier for me to create content for Cogent Roleplay than it is for D&D. But at the end of the day, it's a tabletop game. It's still going to be fun as long as you make it so.
Now, if you had to choose one right here, right now, D&D or Cogent Roleplay for the rest of your life, you can never play the other. Which one are you going with?
Cogent.
All right, and tune in next time to see why George hates D&D. That's it for us. Have a great day.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you for watching this video today. It'd be mighty kind if you would like, comment, and subscribe to this video. And if you can even ring that bell, yeah, that'd be awesome.
And if you want to be kind and support us in doing this here endeavor, you can always hit up our Patreon, where we got plenty of rewards for you fellers. And you can also visit the Discord to hang out with us and many other mighty fine partners. Now, we got to get going, so we'll see y'all later. But y'all come back now. You hear?